Larry here with 7-Stage Law School Prep and another stick figure exam tip. This tip is reasonable inferences are facts too. What do I mean by that? The fact patterns that you're given are just short stories that the professor makes up or maybe rips from the headlines a la Law and Order. They are by their nature necessarily limited. You don't want to read a 6-hour fact pattern, so the professor makes it relatively terse. He may insert ambiguity on purpose, but whether by design or by accident, you don't always get all of the facts that you would need to fulfill each and every element of every claim and every defense that you intend to pursue. Additionally, even if all the claims or defenses are fulfilled by the facts as given, perhaps you're creative and you've thought of claims or defenses that maybe your professor hasn't, which perhaps means that your professor hasn't laid out those facts to set up the additional claims or defenses that you've thought of that your classmates haven't. So here we have a claim and it has elements 1, 2, and 3. This is an example. This blob is the fact pattern that your professor has given you. Within those borders is the entire text of the fact pattern. Anything outside of that is everything that your professor hasn't said explicitly. Sometimes what happens is something like this. You have some facts. You have A that's clearly within the fact pattern that happens to apply to element 3. You have B that slightly lies outside of it. That is, your professor's hinted at a fact, but hasn't really said it fully explicitly for you to feel comfortable that it matches this one. And you've got C, which you suspect might well be the case, but your professor hasn't said it. If you stick with only what's in the boundaries of the fact pattern, you won't be able to flesh out all of the elements of a claim or a defense. So we come back to this statement, reasonable inferences are facts too. And what does that mean? A factual inference is something that follows logically from another fact that you're clearly given. So the classic example of a reasonable inference is you see smoke rolling out of a building, and it's reasonable to infer that where there's smoke, there is fire, fire! A less ripped from Geico commercial way of expressing this is, given A, B must follow. So what does this do? This opens up your factual world. Whereas before you had only what was in this boundary, you now have something that looks like this that encompasses the other facts and allows you to complete this claim or defense. So what you're doing is you're making facts from no facts, as my judge that I clerk for used to say. That's different from completely making up facts, which you do not want to do and which will royally piss off your professor. There's a subtle difference there. The facts that you make from no facts can sometimes, in addition to smoke coming from fire, be of the nature of the dog that's not barking, the obvious absence of something that you would expect if something were the case. There are a million of these, but what you do not want to do is just make up facts out of the blue. Now, one thing that you can do in addition is to stretch things a bit with this and even engage in speculation where the professor has given you at least enough of a factual hook to say this could be possible. In a previous example, you have Smurfette holding a beer glass and punching Papa Smurf. The beer glass itself is a hint. It's speculation as to what that signifies because the facts haven't told you that Smurfette is drunk. But the beer glass signifies something, so you can play with that. You can say that this is assignment, she's just holding a beer glass. That's the obvious one. The consumption of liquor equals potential that she was drunk and has an intoxication defense and blah, 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 blah. But that's more engaging in speculation. It's not as surefire, no pun intended, as smoke coming from fire. So you need to signal what you're doing if you're identifying a reasonable or a factual inference that almost necessarily logically follows from a given fact, or if you're speculating. And I think it's perfectly fine to speculate, but you need to say that you're speculating. When you make a reasonable inference or a logical inference, you can just say A causes B. And if it's something like smoke and fire or a dog not barking, your professor will follow you. I think it's fine to speculate. In fact, I think that takes you to the very edges of the exam. But you need to be very clear. You cannot make categorical statements like that. You'll need to say A may lead to B, or it may lead to C, or it may lead to D. And for instance, with a beer glass, it could mean that Smurfette is just holding a beer glass, or that she's drunk, or that she's been drinking but hasn't had enough to actually invoke the intoxication defense. If you're going to speculate, you need to say that with a word like if or perhaps. I guess this is a good question. I mean, how much do you speculate? Well, I think I've got a spectrum here. Here is just sticking with the facts, and it's super safe because there's a bunny rabbit here. And here you've got just rank speculation. You're just making stuff up. I think there is some imaginary wall. The farther you go along this axis, the more you're engaging in inferences than speculation, than kind of making stuff up. I think you want to be somewhere like here, where you're really stretching the facts, but you're being clever. You're being able to support the facts that you make out of no facts. But you don't pass this wall, Hadrian's wall of incredulity. Beyond this wall, the professor doesn't believe you. You've lost credibility. His BS detector goes off once you cross a certain line in speculating too much. So you want to stay here, where you get the most points, but you don't set off the professor's BS detector.